You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more to life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more to life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, like some bottles, impress them girls. It's more to life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we made it. We made it. Who dats, Saints fans? We made it to Week 18, and sadly, we won't be making it much farther than then. So that's it. I mean, that's in the books. The 2018 or the 2024 2025 seasons in the books all the way through Week 18, getting a 5-11, a 5-12 final record, and actually ended up being the worst team, last place in the NFC South. Which I know you could look at that as a negative in some sense, but it actually is a good thing because they actually move up a little bit in draft position because I thought they were pretty much locked in at 10, like no matter what, like lost 3 games in a row and still stuck at 10. So luckily they moved up a little bit too because Chicago Bears and the Panthers, all those teams won. I think it, even though the Panthers are ahead of them in the division, it's something about like quality of wins still has Carolina in front of them in draft position, which is that's kind of weird. But so we don't get, I guess, the benefit of having a draft pick in front of Carolina, but we do get the benefit of having the last place schedule. So hopefully that'll help. Even though it seems like the last couple of years the Saints have had like one of the leagues just by winnage per like previous seasons winning percentage have some of the easiest schedules, and we've all seen how that's worked out the last 3 or 4 years. But so that's the 2024 2025 season. It wasn't pretty, but if you like drama, this would have been a season for you, or just being a Saints fan in general will bring you as much drama as you want. I expected the Saints to be at least a little bit better than this. That's for sure. I was thinking that they'd win more around 7 to 10 games. I just couldn't really factor in all the injuries and obviously a coaching change. I mean, kind of already factored in the injuries because they're always hurt anyways. But yeah, I don't know if you could have predicted it to be hit at like one position so bad, a position, a group that already wasn't really that great in the offensive line, just completely getting a bomb just going off in the offensive line room in the early portion of the season. But anyways, let's so we've talked a little bit just about the season. It's coming to an end. It was it was good to have you guys here with me and ride it out till the end. But let's talk about this the Saints 19-27 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, let's talk about it a little bit. So can I get a menu? And so this game felt very similar to the first meeting between the Saints and the Buccaneers in the dome at the early, like way back at the towards the beginning of the season. Like what was that? It was like week 6 or 7 or somewhere in there. But this game seemed very similar to that game in regards to the Saints to look good in the first half. Scored some points. Actually looked a little more consistent and competitive throughout the first half instead of just having that 27 point explosion in the second quarter like they did in the first meeting between the Buccaneers. But looked really good throughout the first half of the game. I was ready to say Spencer Rattler's him, and he's the next franchise quarterback. We're about ready to hand the keys over to Spencer Rattler because he was what? He was 21 of 28 for like 200 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Like that's like about as good of a game that any Saints quarterback has had all year. Just in the first half, there was ridiculously good. But then, I mean, he went on to he ended up having 42 attempts and then went on to only complete five more passes because he only completed 26 in the entire game and then only had like 40 more yards passing. I guess it was better. At least he didn't turn the ball over, didn't get throw any interceptions. And then I guess we saw this in the first meeting between the Buccaneers and Todd Bowles with how Spencer Rattler was showing a glimmer of potential, and that maybe he's got it in the first half, but then in the second half he just starts sending blitzes and taking away all the easy throws. And I think I want to say he did get one of those sacks did come in the first half, but he got sacked and just didn't seem got sacked one more time in the second half and just didn't seem as comfortable as he was in the first half. A lot of those throws, especially like on some of those last minute drives in the second quarter, like he was hitting wide receivers like wide open for like 10, 15-yard chunks and just gobbling it up. It's just sad that they weren't able to get more points out of it. That's what this game seemed like as well. There was a Jordan Howden had an interception in this game, and just like they intercepted Baker Mayfield like two or three times in the first game, but weren't able to get any points out of it. We're only able to add like 3 points off of that interception that gave them the ball, like in Buccaneers field in Buccaneers uh, territory. All right, let's go over some stats here, and we'll circle back to some of the Saints players and MVPs and hot takes for this. So first downs, I mean, this is where you see like, well, well, I guess why the game was close. I guess this game was close throughout until like the fourth quarter. This game was close. Actually, through the first half, the Saints actually led by two scores. So really, I mean, until the fourth quarter, the Saints pretty much controlled this game the whole way. I mean, that's kind of how the Saints have been all year. It'd be nice if if the games could just end in the first half. Would be kind of nice. The Saints may have a winning record and be in the playoffs if that was the case. But yeah, so you see, Saints had 19 first downs. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 20. And we always get to this stat, and it always is usually a clear projector of who won the game or how the game went, unless it's the Saints that are the team rushing for 150 plus yards and two touchdowns. The Saints can still lose even after having a day like that. But the rushing numbers for this day were the Saints weren't able to get loose. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jordan Mims and Jamal Williams are only healthy. You're only healthy running backs with no Kendra Miller or Alvin Kamara. They were only able to get loose for 19 carries for 64 yards and no touchdowns. And then this was kind of a sneaky statistic kind of that came out by the Buccaneers. I think it got added up so much because Baker Mayfield had 68 rushing yards off of 9 attempts. Like every time the Saints looked like they were going to collapse the pocket. I mean, he says he rushed 9 times, and like one of them, the only one the Saints were able to stop him on was when it was like a designed run play. I'm trying to think who that was. I think that was maybe Will Harris or Hugo Almadi came up and blew that play up like right away. But so he had 9 runs, but only one of them was a designed play. So like on 8 of these runs, it came off of situations where the pocket looked like it was collapsing around Baker Mayfield and that they were about to get a sack. And next thing you know, he's taken off for 15, 20-yard rush, which that's how he accumulated the 68 yards out of that. But the Buccaneers quietly had a ridiculously good day running the ball on the Saints, and that's really what led to them winning this game. It didn't seem like that, but man, if they could have just added like one or two sacks to the rushing total, where it's about to turn into a rushing attempt by Baker Mayfield, where he gets that 15, 20 yards when he should be losing uh, like 5, 10 yards on a sack. If they could have just got one or two of those, that would have probably been enough to win this game. Because man, the Saints got them into third down like felt like a million times. We're just not able to get them off the field consistently. But they had 31 attempts for 179 yards and a touchdown. That's nothing new if you've been a Saints fan, seeing the Saints uh, give up almost 200 yards rushing. And then quarterback numbers, if we were just going off of the first half, hell, I mean, Spencer Rattler was better than was better than Baker Mayfield. And I mean, even with the second half included, I mean, you could still maybe say he was better. The only thing that he didn't have is he didn't have his wideouts coming down with ridiculous touchdown catches. I'm trying to see who it was. Jalen McMillan and uh, Payne Darham came down with some ridiculous touchdown catches, which it's crazy because the Saints were in basically a very similar situation with Marquez Valdez Scantling. He had two attempts where one he couldn't hang on to it, got pulled out at the end on a play that could have been like a 20 or 30-yard touchdown pass, and got pulled out at the end, and then uh, had a very almost the exact same play on another drive. Had it thrown to him, and he just couldn't get his feet in bounds. Which on the other hand, the Buccaneers receivers were getting it down in bounds, and were scoring touchdowns. Like that's all the Saints needed was one of those touchdowns from Marquez Valdez Scantling, him either to hang on to the ball or get both his feet down, and how that probably would have been enough to separate the Saints to separate themselves earlier on in this game and probably win it. So this the numbers. Spencer Rattler was 26 for 42 26 attempts for 42. No, 26 for 42 for 240 yards and a touchdown. No interceptions. So that was a bit of an improvement from the previous game against the Raiders. He didn't throw an interception. And then Baker Mayfield was 21 of 32 for 221 yards, two touchdowns, and an interception. Jordan Howden got him on an interception at midfield, but the Saints weren't able to do anything with it. That was in the second half. That's the only reason the Saints were able to get three more points in the second half. Like we were talking, besides the defense completely collapsing, this game was very similar to the first matchup between the Buccaneers, where the Saints looked really good and even had the lead going into the second half, but then just I don't know, Spencer Rattler and the entire offense, not just Spencer Rattler, but Spencer Rattler and the entire offense were just shoved in a locker and turned into an absolute pumpkin. But at least the Saints didn't get. At least the Saints fought hard and fought hard throughout and on each side of the ball, offense, special teams, and defense. At least they didn't give up 50 points in this game. I guess is the one improvement from the first meeting between these two teams. And then sacks. Spencer Rattler, he was sacked twice for a loss of 12 yards, and he was sacked once in the first half, and then I think he was sacked another time in the second half, where he just basically just like ran into Vita Vea and just kind of fell down. And then Nephi Sewell had the one sack on on Baker Mayfield for a 5-yard loss. And then the total yards, Saints had 292, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 100 more, basically 395. So the 100 more came from just being so much better and running the ball. The Saints couldn't run the ball at all in this game, which was a key factor to why Spencer Rattler didn't look very good in the second half. And then no fumbles or no fumbles, no fumbles lost. Tampa Bay, they fumbled but didn't lose it. Very common playing the Saints. They'll force a fumble, but they won't recover it. And then no turnovers for the Saints, but the Buccaneers had one turnover, an interception around midfield by Baker Mayfield that did lead to 3 points, thanks to Jordan Howden. But definitely with how the Saints have been and how their season's been, that's just you got to get more than 3 points if you're expecting to win off of any extra possessions or opportunities for the Saints, at least for this season. But thankfully, the season is over, everybody. So hopefully that that method or tension or expecting to do won't do that quite as much. Hopefully, with a new so we can get in a new culture in here. With a new culture, hopefully we won't do stuff like that. Maybe we can bring in a culture for the defense that is like ball hawks, have some ball hawks, fumble recoverers would be nice. And then just the kind of thing that just kind of annoys you and makes you mad about this. This is kind of how the Saints have been the last couple games. It just kind of, when it comes to the discipline and not making stupid, boneheaded plays and things like that, the Saints have just been terrible with penalties. But the Buccaneers were even worse. But the Saints still couldn't find a way to win. They were 8 for 77 yards, and the Buccaneers were actually 12 for 90 and somehow still found a way to win. And one of the worst penalties was after the Saints blocked a punt in the second half and or just rushed a punt and leading it to like it went on the ground on the snap and the punter had to pick it up real quick and punt it off and it punted off his side of his foot for like 13 for like a 13-yard punt. And so the Saints started the drive at midfield, and on the first play of that drive, I think not Derek Carr, but Spencer Rattler completed a pass to Foster Monroe around close to the Buccaneers sideline. So it would have been second and I'm trying to think. Yeah, second and yeah, he must have been completed a 6-yard pass over there around the Buccaneers sideline, which that would have made it 2nd and 4. But as Foster Monroe was getting everything together and cleaning up after the play, I guess he got like kind of pushed into the Buccaneers sideline, and as he was at sideline benches or whatever, and as he was going away, I guess he flipped the ball over at them and got a 15-yard penalty, which ended up moving the Saints back and making it like first and I think it was like 1st and 21 or 2nd and 21 after that. So that like ruined the Saints' opportunity to extend their lead a little bit and just completely wasted a good opportunity with great field position there. So that was the biggest penalty that came back to haunt them. And who knows if that came back to haunt Foster Moreau at all. I don't know if that came back and that was karma for him, or is that's just a classic and just kind of the cherry on top for how the Saints to finish their season, because what was the last drive of the Saints season and he ends up tearing his knee up. I had to leave the stadium on a cart in an air cast. So after being a little too bullish over on the Buccaneers sidelines and probably being 1-2 with Juwan Johnson with your starting tight end, I guess, and both Juwan Johnson and Foster Monroe have made some really clutch catches and have really bailed out Spencer Rattler, your young quarterback, these last couple games. But then, of course, this last drive, you can't get out of a game healthy. Doesn't even matter if you don't have a game for like 6 months. We're gonna take one of your guys out, like one of your last legitimate starters in Foster Monroe. I don't know if that was just quick karma for acting a little silly and having a stupid play on the sidelines, or if that's just because he's a Saint. I think that's maybe just because he's a Saint, honestly. So the penalties, and then third down. We already talked about the rushing numbers being such a big margin between the two, but such a big discrepancy between the rushing yards, and that being a reason behind the Buccaneers being able to pull this win off. That the Saints dominated the first 3.5 quarters of this game, but the Saints weren't good on third down. But I mean, they haven't good on third down all year. They were 3 for 13, but their defense was even worse on third down. They allowed the Buccaneers to convert 10 of 16 third down conversions. I mean, just being 50% on your third down conversions is really good, but 10 of 16, that's ridiculous. And then the Saints were 2 of 3 on fourth downs, and then the Buccaneers were just 1 of 1. And then even though the Saints dominated time of possession in the first half of this game, it was like 20 minutes to 10 in the first half. The Saints ended the game with just 27 minutes and 44 seconds to the Buccaneers 32 seconds and 16 minutes. So the Saints only ended up having the ball for like about 8 minutes in the second half. Like it was just a complete flip. Like I don't know, it's just like they completely were a completely different team. Like they went from being like a 10-7 team to the 5-12 team that we know. And man, you just want to see the consistency, man. If we could just get an entire game from Spencer Rattler where he looks like what he did in the first half or what he looks like in some of these individual quarters, if he could just look like a semblance of that through an entire game, through a full 60 minutes, no overtime, hopefully, just a full 60 minutes and come out with a W, I think there'd be a lot of people that have got maybe one leg off or have already jumped off the bandwagon. They'd probably be ready to jump back on the Spencer Rattler bandwagon. But that's your stats and your numbers. Let's go over like the MVP stuff here real quick. So my pre-game offensive MVP for this game was going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He did end up leading the Saints in rushing for the second week in a row. He had about 20 yards rushing last week, and then he had eight attempts for 26 yards in this game. So I mean, he did. I mean, it's not like looking like really like MVP numbers, but I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was your leading rusher for the day. And then he had also had one catch on a screenplay where he set up his blockers real nice, and it was cool, kind of fun seeing a couple big offensive linemen hog mollies out in front of him on a play where he caught a screen pass and took it for 14 yards. That was one of the few exciting offensive plays from this game. So just off of those numbers, I don't think you could respectively give it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think you probably have to either give it to Spencer Rattler for his first half performance, the 21 of 28, 200 yards, a touchdown. That's pretty impressive. That's impressive for just an entire game. But the second half was not so good. But then if you don't go with Spencer Rattler, then you probably go with Juwan Johnson, who was 7 of 6 for 80 yards and 26, a long of 26. So I mean that was one of Juwan Johnson's best games of the year. We've been talking about how Spencer Rattler started kind of targeting his tight ends, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, because basically they're the only receivers, reliable receivers that he had. Foster Moreau was 4 for 4 for 31 yards and long of 11, and then we already talked about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Basically, just couldn't ring those touchdowns in. He had 2 catches that could have been some like 25, 30-yard touchdown passes. He just couldn't get his feet down in bounds and just couldn't get full control of the ball on two of those targets. But he was targeted 8 times, but only caught 3 of them. He had two that should have been touchdowns for 33 yards and just a long of 20. So I'd say either Spencer Rattler or Juwan Johnson with his 80 yards are probably your post-game MVPs. And then on defense, I'd just go with Jordan Howding. I mean, he literally accounted for 3 points. It should have been more, but Jordan Howding playing good and time. I think that may have been after uh, Tyrann Mathieu went out of like his eighth or ninth game this year. That's happened to Tyrann Matthews. Like seems like on every other game, Tyrann Matthews is getting knocked out of it with some simple type of injury, nothing ever serious. But he got his bell rung, got a concussion, so it's different than what he's kind of been dealing with all year. But I'd give that to Jordan Howding. He put the Saints in situation to pull away a little bit with more points, even though it was just three, but they should have got more with where they got the ball like at the just at midfield, just kind of inside the Buccaneers territory. But he was had the one interception and returned it for just 3 yards, had a pass deflection, and then had three combined tackles, three of them solo. So I give that to Jordan Howding. And then Blake Grupe coming being your special teams offensive MVP for the first post game one for the first time in a while. But he looked solid in this game. He was 1 for 1 on extra points and then 4 for 4 on field goals attempted and made. And the long, I think his long was a 49-yarder. So I give that to Blake Grupe. So on MVPs, post game MVPs, offensively, probably Spencer Rattler in the first half or Juwan Johnson. And then on defense, Jordan Howding for literally giving the Saints 3 points. Should have been more with his interception at midfield. Uh, Blake Grupe for just being automatic for when his name was called upon. So there's your post game MVPs and your MVPs for this game. And now then, on to hot take. And this is something we're talking about hot takes. And this means it's something that maybe not expected to actually happen, or it's just a far out prediction. Well, this was something I was really expecting the Saints to probably actually do. Like I was really hoping that they would do this. So I say hot takes and more is because it made me hot at the end of the game because they weren't able to do it. And I'm talking about I was wanting the Saints to keep Mike Evans from getting that 85 yards and 1,000 yards at the end of this game. And the game was over already. They could have just kneeled it out with like 30, 40 seconds left, and the Saints had like one timeout. But no, they decided to throw it. And the Saints' entire defense, Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Hugo Amade, Jordan Howden, they all should have been covering Mike Evans to not give him that easy, what was it, like a 7, 8 yard pickup that ended up giving him 87 yards when all he needed was 85 to get that 1,000. And I know I say this, even though Sean Payton has done this in the past to get players their bonuses. And last year, the Saints I thought was even maybe even dirtier, but with the sneak play touchdown at the end of the year against the Falcons. So I guess I'm being kind of a hypocrite a little bit, but that made me mad. That made me mad. That got me flamed up. I was already accepted the loss. I was okay with that. But man, them just like basically just like handing over the 1,000 yard record and putting Mike Evans' name up there with Jerry Rice now. That made me just want to puke. Like that had me steaming for a minute. I was not happy about that, and just the Buccaneers in general. That they were kind of chippy at times in this game, and so like even though it was set up to where it was gonna possibly break some Falcons' hearts or maybe just give them false hope. There was times where I wanted the Saints to just go ahead and beat them, and it probably wouldn't have mattered anyways. The Falcons still wouldn't have made the playoffs because they ended up losing like 44-38 to the the Panthers, so it wouldn't have even mattered anyways. But so that was my hot take. My hot take was I was expecting the Saints to have some pride, have some self-respect and some pride, and keep Mike Evans from getting that 1,000 yards, but apparently that's not the case, and that can lead back to the whole coaching staff. Like that'd be something that Dennis Allen would do, but I wouldn't have expected Darren Rizzi to let that happen so easily. So that's right up there with kind of reasons besides the fact he only won like 3 games why he was the interim coach. That right there is enough for me not to want him as a head coach. At least I'd welcome him back as a special teams, his previous position, but not a head coach, not one that's going to just let one of your rivals just pick up a historic record just so easily like that at the end of the game when they have nothing to play for. They literally are just they're dogging on you, you know. So that made me sick and that made me mad. And I'm obviously you're listening to me talking about it. I'm still kind of heated. It's kind of the last bit of the 2024-2025. Definitely had a kick in the ass on the way out with the Mike Evans record and the Foster Moreau knee injury. All right, now then on to picks and scores. So just kind of with the hot take, my hot take was ended up being very relevant for this game, but didn't end up hitting. Well, my pick and score ended up being very relevant and very close as well, because at one point in this game, the score was 19-20, and I predicted this game to end up being a tie, 20-20 tie, with the Saints missing a game-winning field goal at the end uh, to make it a tie. And even if the Falcons won their game, they still wouldn't. They would still get trumped over the Buccaneers for the playoff spot, winning the NFC South, even with a tie. But this game went exactly how I wanted it to go, to stress NFC South opponents and stress out Buccaneers and stress out Falcons fans to the max. And it did. It did, because even with the Falcons dealing with their own battle with the Panthers throughout, that didn't play out quite as well as I wanted it to give the Falcons as much false hope as possible, because I was kind of expecting with that prediction, I was kind of expecting maybe the Falcons to kind of pull out early in that game and look like they kind of have a comfortable lead to where they're watching the Saints win their game against the Buccaneers for the first 3.5 quarters and then choke it up at the end. But it was close enough, besides it being a tie and it being even more heart shattering to the Falcons fans. But it may even be even worse that they lost to the Panthers in a shootout, no less. 44-38. Like, that's just embarrassing. Like, that has me concerned about my defense going into next season. But maybe they have a little bit of confidence in the Penix Jr. pick, and same kind of with the Panthers as well. Bryce Young looking pretty good there since he's been benched. But so I think the picks and score was pretty close. It definitely what I was predicting and kind of what I was wanting out of it got that in full effect, with uh, both the Falcons and the Buccaneers fans probably being physically ill at times of both of their game, as whether this is the last game of their season or if they're actually going to get in the playoffs or not. So I think that held true as well. So I would say the MVP didn't really hit. My hot take was very relevant for the game, but didn't hit. They didn't keep Mike Evans from 1,000 yards, and then the pick and score was almost spot on, and the game played out like we wanted it to, and it was good, kind of, that it wasn't a tie or anything like that. That the Saints actually got a full capital letter L from this game, helped them actually move up a spot. If the Raiders could have just continued to be the Raiders and won yesterday, the Saints could have actually moved up from eighth. But coming into this week, and after the previous 3 weeks where they'd lost 3 in a row and hadn't moved an inch from the 10th spot, I didn't think they were going to move at all. So that they moved to the ninth and were even pretty close to getting the eighth pick, I mean, that's good. So it played out the way it needed to. All right, so that's your MVP, hot takes, picks, and score. Let's just go over uh, coaching candidates and other teams that are looking for coaches, head coaches. I'm not going to dive too much into this because this was kind of more just the post game and reaction show to the Saints Bucs game, but we'll be getting into this in upcoming podcasts. So I'll just go ahead and go over uh, go over just some of the Saints candidates and other teams that are will be involved. That the Saints are will be duking it out for trying to get one of these big names. So just the teams that are looking for coaches right now are the Saints, the Bears, the Jets, the Patriots, Jacksonville, and then the Raiders just fired Antonio Pierce. The Raiders that just dog walked the Saints 25-10 like 2 weeks ago are actually firing their coach. So I was kind of hoping that with that win, and hopefully if they could have won yesterday against the Chargers, I was hoping that that would lead to them uh, letting Antonio Pierce stay on for a little bit longer. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So the Raiders are in their search for a head coach again, and then just the candidates that the Saints are interested in or have asked for interviews. I'll just go through these real quick. Not going to delve too deep into this, but Aaron Glenn with the Detroit Lions, Kellen Moore, Joe Brady, Anthony Weaver, Darren Rizzi, and Darren Rizzi. He's actually the Jets, which we talk. He's a Jersey guy. He's a Jersey guy for the Jets. The Jets have actually requested uh, uh, an interview for him, and I would be okay with other than him going to like any other team or not staying along with the Saints. If he became the head coach of New York Jets, I would be like 100% okay with that. But that's a candidate, Darren Rizzi, and then Mike Kafka, and then Mike Vrabel, and then even I hear that they're interested even in Matt Nagy. But of those listed there, the one that I've always kind of been interested in and kind of surprised that now he's considered like your one of your top two, top three candidates, which it seemed like last head coaching hiring season, it didn't seem like anyone was interested in him. And then even kind of the midway of the season, you're hearing like fans talk about him and mentioning him, and just didn't seem like that either teams don't want a defensive coordinator or just didn't think he did enough with what he had in Tennessee. But I've always thought I would like Mike Vrabel, get Mike Vrabel in here and have him just completely change the culture. Would is what would happen with Mike Vrabel. You'd get more of that Patriot style and culture in here, and definitely have a culture and a head coach that's respected by the players would be nice. And just get that in here. Get a defensive minded head coach again. I know people hate that, but we got a special teams one right now with Darren Rizzi. But people hate that, and then get McDaniels or some of those past coordinators in here to be the offensive coordinator. Or if I guess you'd probably have a meeting between Mike Vrabel and your current offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. So you just have to see if he likes him. But yeah, I always thought Mike Vrabel would be a good hire because it would make the Saints more interesting, not boring, and even with just him added as your head coach, hell, that'd probably lead to prime time games that the Saints otherwise probably aren't expecting really anymore. But adding a big name like Matt Nagy or Mike Vrabel, that would change things. I think that would change things real quick. But from what I'm hearing now, he's like the top candidate. He's like one or two. Him and Ben Johnson are like considered like the 1 2. And I didn't mention Ben Johnson, but I think I'd heard reports that he's not really interested in coming to the Saints. I don't think he outright said he's not interested in coming to the Saints, but that he wants to go to a really appealing uh, uh, organization, which I'm guessing that means maybe one that already has a franchise quarterback or one that's has a lot of cap space or is in a big time market, is what I'm guessing, which the Saints don't have a franchise quarterback, are in cap hell and are in a small market. So I imagine that's what he means by that. But so those are your candidates. I don't have too big of an opinion on it on it now. I just gave you my little bit of my opinion just on that. I just even at the beginning of last year, I always thought Mike Vrabel would be an interesting coach because I always liked him when he was with Tennessee. You know, won some playoff games there, got to an AFC Championship game, knocked the Patriots out of the playoffs. Tom Brady's last season with the with the Patriots, finished his career with the Patriots off of a pick six. Like that's kind of stuff that I remember from Mike Vrabel. But I guess uh, there's some people out there that don't like him or think he underperformed with the kind of talent that he had. I mean, mostly they must be talking about the defense and Derrick Henry, but I mean, he basically had like this De- Derek Carr for his quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. Not as if he had like a franchise quarterback having Ryan Tannehill at the helms. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. We'll get more into the coaching candidates and probably narrow it down a little bit more once we hear what's coming out of some of these interviews and once one start getting hired to like the Bears, the Jets, the Patriots, Jacksonville Raiders, and I imagine for the ones that look more appealing, I'm guessing that's like Jacksonville because they have uh, Trevor Lawrence, the Patriots, they have Drake May, the Jets because it's in New York, big market, the Bears because they have Caleb Williams, and then I'd say the Saints and the Raiders are kind of neutral. Besides the fact, I guess the Raiders are in a big time market because they're in Las Vegas and in such a nice stadium, but it's definitely easy to see where the Saints maybe aren't at the top of the list of coaches candidates, not coaching candidates, but the coaches candidates for where they may want to work next. But we'll delve a lot more deep into that when we have more of an idea who it might actually be. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. The Saints 2024-2025 season. Uh, it was something. That's about all I can say about it. It was something. Definitely for sports fans, the drama that you desired was definitely in this season, but I could do with a few more wins. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?